We're back, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we had to come back after this incredible weekend for Sun Belt football.
We couldn't just leave you hanging after all that. Just insane weekend for the Sun Belt. I was at Hancock Whitney for the first game at South Alabama's new stadium. I'm going to tell you about it.
And we brought our buddy Scott Watkins in from the pages to talk about everything that happened last night because let me tell you something. It was a busy day in the Sun Belt.
We have so much to get to. So we're going to go through everything. And I'm just so excited to do it. Let's go.
Roll it. On the show tonight, we've got
every night was a battle.
You can lock this in, take it to the bank.
No class at all. It's unbelievable.
They should see a relatively quick turnaround.
Show me the money.
Big water slides, snow cone truck and everything.
One team stands alone.
Well, you know what I think about Troy.
I'm losing my mind over here.
We've got the moment you've all been waiting for.
Of course.
Welcome into the Bench Boys podcast. I'm Colin Cahill. This is my boy, Thomas Gleaton. And man, has a lot of things changed for us. Thomas, you moved states. I guess I was here in Alabama, but you moved states, and now we're doing this literally in two different states, which makes it even more fun.
Yeah, like you moved, I moved, we all moved. Everything is moving, and I think change is definitely in the air. I think that's a big theme for this week is change. There's so much change. And for the better, for the Sun Belt at least. It was a great weekend, and I couldn't be more excited about what we saw on Saturday.
It was a great weekend, and you want to know what? While you guys are here, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter. Just before this episode gets started, because it's going to be a jam-packed episode. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So hit that subscribe button. We're on Twitter at the OG Bench Boys. What are we? Spotify, everything. I mean, people know us at this point. But yeah, just give us a follow if you want to continue on with us. We're gonna hopefully this will be more of a recurring thing now, since we finally have football back on. For one thing, we didn't think we'd ever be at this day, and there were a couple of days where we thought it wasn't going to happen. But no, Saturday was great. It was a busy, incredible day. National television for all 8 Sun Belt schools. And so we brought in our buddy Scott Watkins. He's going to come in here and he's going to talk to us about basically what he thought. I mean, you and Scott just finished the Sun Belt pages, which we're also going to talk about to kind of preview this whole season. And I don't think anybody could have called what happened yesterday at all.
Out of the gate.
And now we're joined by Scott Watkins, the creator of the Sun Belt pages, also with Thomas Gleaton as well, helping out. Scott, obviously, we've had him on the show before. I think this is like third, fourth, fifth time. Who knows? Hey, Alyssa, you're just sneaking out there. Scott, once again, thank you for coming in. Obviously, just to get started, let's just talk about the Sun Belt pages and how that kind of got going and all the work that you guys have put into it.
Well, it got going one day when I was at work. I work at a grocery store, which is a very exciting job. I was walking down the aisles and I saw the magazines, and I was like, you know what? We could do something like that. I could probably make a Sunbelt football magazine. I know how to write. I know a lot of Sunbelt football stuff. I have no idea about magazine making or paginating or designing. And that's when it hit me. I was like, I gotta text Thomas. So I texted Thomas. I said, hey, you want to do a football magazine? And I could tell right away. He was like, yeah, that's doable. And I said, I'll do all the writing. And Thomas was like, oh, yeah, I'm on board. We'll do this. We'll make it happen. So I was like, okay, bet. And, we got after it. And throughout, like, the whole month of June, Thomas was getting after it. He was going crazy. I was getting after it. I was getting interviews and all that. And then I remember in July, we kind of stopped because it seemed like college football was not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't do anything for a while, and it created this really massive crunch there the last 2 weeks. But we got it done, and it looks good, and I really like it.
I mean, you guys probably got, a dozen interviews with coaches and players. What was it like trying to get, just those interviews set up? I know you've been doing a lot of stuff before this, but what was it like trying to get all those interviews set up in a COVID pandemic era?
We did the Sun Belt East first, and that was super easy because it did in June. Just emailed people, and they got back pretty quickly.
Mhm.
They were mostly phone calls. They just, gave me the player's number, or they took my number, and we just did it that way. And then we saved the Sun Belt West for last. Didn't mean to save it for last, but more like in July. But we ended up doing it in August, and it created this horrible crunch where the last week I was trying to get 3 interviews in, or 4 interviews in. Arkansas State, they tried. We couldn't get anything done, but I appreciate them for trying. Louisiana would not respond, but that was in the middle of a hurricane. So I was like, okay, that's okay. Texas State did not respond. Not shocking. That's Texas State. Louisiana Monroe did not respond. That was the last one. And Thomas probably remembers this, but I was freaking out that Friday before we released that Monday, and 3 days before I had nothing for ULM, absolutely nothing. And so I'm like, okay, this is not good, because I reached out to Adam Hunsucker on Twitter. I sent him a DM, and he just left me on red, and I was like, oh God, this is it. I don't know what we're gonna do with this page, but I double texted him, and he got back with me. He gave me an interview. It turns out he had spent all day cleaning up hurricane damage, so I definitely understand it, and I'm just very grateful that we got the help that we needed from all the schools and all the people that we reached out to. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened.
What was the
I just remember a bunch of that. I do remember that day because he texted me more than he's probably ever texted me on the one day. I just get text after text saying, I don't know what we're gonna do. This guy's falling through. This guy's falling through. And I'm like, it'll be fine. We'll make it work. It'll happen. We can reach out to other people. We'll find somebody. And it did. And we got it out on time, just barely on time, Monday of week 1.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you guys had an interview with Shy Wirtz. What was the interview? What was that like, getting to be able to catch up with him?
That was good. That was a while ago.
Okay.
That was one of our early interviews. He was a great interview. Really enjoyed talking to him. He was very excited about the season. He's very confident in himself, and that was always a lot of fun to talk to players that are feeling themselves a little bit.
What when you guys finally had the release, what was the expectation that you had, or that both of you guys had? Were you confident in all the stuff that you were able to put out? I mean, what were your expectations?
Thomas's expectations might have been different, but when we sold that first copy, I was like, you know what, this is good. This is a success. I'm happy.
Well, I knew between the two of us, we could come up with about 10 people who'd be like, I'll throw them $6 for this. And it ended up being what it was. And I think it was more than that. So it did exceed both of our expectations. But I knew that between the two of us, what we had put together, the content that we put together, the product that we put together, it was I knew it had legs for at least the first week. Mm-hmm. And that was the biggest week of sales so far. So
yeah, really that first day, because the drop off from day 1 to day 2 was pretty steep.
Really? What I mean, obviously it's a preview magazine. Is there? Obviously you guys have the Twitter account that we saw yesterday. Obviously did really well. Is there stuff that you guys are wanting to put out middle of the year, during the season? What's kind of the next step?
I haven't really. I have been asked that several times already, and me and Thomas haven't really talked about it. But I think that there are some things that we could do. I've got things in my head that I'm like, man, this would be great if I had time and help and resources. But just managing that account alone, it's a lot. And trying to get what we need to get. Adding Zach was really big because the graphics that he's been making have been pretty dope, and that helps out a lot. So
he has been a really fantastic addition to the social media team on that. He volunteered. He was like, hey guys, can I be a part of this? And we're like, sure, come on. And it took a little bit off of our plate, but I think it also added an extra element that made not only the pages as a product, but also the social media account bigger than I expected it to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and is this something that, say, like we do have people that watch this, is this something that if there's Georgia Southern fans or South Alabama fans, like, this is a like league wide type deal? So I mean, anybody could really, if they wanted to help out, they don't have to be Troy, they don't have to be some sort of college. If anybody wants to help out, you guys, I'm assuming we'll take whatever help you can get.
Oh yeah, definitely. Anybody can volunteer to do absolutely whatever they want for us. We'll pay them absolutely nothing, and it'll be a good experience for them. So yeah, come on aboard. We're adding team member number 4 today. That'll be out here pretty soon.
Okay.
But yeah, anybody else wants to hop in, join the fun.
Join it. Yeah. Well, obviously yesterday was a big day for I guess Saturday, because this will probably be released a little bit later. Huge first week for the Sun Belt. 8 national televised games. Going into the day, I don't think a lot of people would have pegged for what was going to happen actually happen. What were your thoughts? If you can, that morning window when you were watching, because I mean, I was flipping between our state, App State, and ULL. With that morning window, what was kind of the emotions that were going through your head, I guess, throughout the entire morning watching those 3 games?
I guess emotionally, my strongest feelings were probably honestly about App State, especially early on whenever that first hour went by. App State did not look good at all against Charlotte. That was a little disappointing. They were able to pull that out. I thought, from a run game perspective, App State looked very good, moving from their one-back style to a running back by committee. But defensively, they're a little rough coming out of the gate. Zach Thomas did not look like the Sun Belt's best quarterback right away. So that's going to be some things that they're going to have to fix this week, because they got Marshall coming in, and that quarterback looked ridiculous last week.
Mm-hmm.
But with the other 2 games, with the big games, I was shocked, honestly, about the Arkansas State game. I mean, it didn't seem like Arkansas State should have won that in any universe, really. But Kansas State, they matched them toe-to-toe. They said, what, you shoot off your big toe, we'll shoot off our big toe. It was just, we will give you every chance to win. And that's what happened. And Arkansas State took advantage. Jay Adams was ridiculous. Big shout out to him. Gave us a lot of views on the page. And Louisiana was a wild game too, because that on paper looks, if you just looked at the score, the box score, it looks like Louisiana really dominated it. The only 3 plays. That game was decided by 3 plays.
Yep.
Iowa State had more yards, more passing yards, more first downs. They had more everything. But 3 big plays, punt return touchdown, kick return touchdown, 78-yard pass, that decided the game. And if you're a Louisiana fan, you're probably pretty excited about that. You can play the way that you did on offense and still find a way to win against Iowa State.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job against. I mean, the way the announcers talked Iowa State up the entire game, felt like Iowa State, was the next Clemson, to be honest with you. And to be honest, I have a personal history with Iowa State, obviously, and I never really thought they were that good. I thought they lost a lot, and I think the announcers. I mean, Brock Purdy's he's a good quarterback, but I really like the fact that he looked really bad most of the day. Like, he only threw for 140 yards for most of the day. And that was my big question with Louisiana is, okay, their defense is what has always been kind of that question mark. I mean, last year they played really well, but just what they would do against – I mean, they had 3 wide receivers that were 6'7", and what they were going to do against guys like that. And they really made Brock Purdy look really bad for most of the day. So that's out of that game, that was my biggest surprise. Thomas, what about you?
No, I think I'm agreeing with you on that one, because it felt like Iowa State was becoming this year's Utah, because last year everybody's high on Utah, and they ended up being a solid team last year. But this year it felt like they were the trendy pick to be the breakout team. They were going to be the team that went as a dark horse in the Big 12 and maybe made an NY6 game. But now, like you said, Scott, I think on paper, Louisiana, it looks like Louisiana dominated it, but I think people in the Sun Belt, and I guess the best way for me to put it is for the 2 of us who were literally putting together a preview for this, and he did more diving through the numbers than I did, but from what he was putting out and as I put it together, it felt like Louisiana was pretty much the same team they were last year, except better. And so put that up against a middling Big 12 team, maybe a dark horse Big 12 team. You got a combination that's actually going to be a closer game than a lot of people will expect.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you've got a trendy team, a team to be a dark horse, what that team is versus what this Louisiana team is, we ended up exactly what we got. It was one of the three big games. It was the one I fully expected the Sun Belt to win. I was more expecting that game to go the Sun Belt's way than the other two, honestly. And spoiler alert for those who haven't picked up the pages, I think Louisiana is a very good team and probably the best team in the Sun Belt.
I think Levi Lewis did everything he needed to do yesterday. Like, he didn't lose a game. Like, he didn't lose the game. I mean, they had no turnovers. He was smart. I mean, his maturity was like, I think, front and center yesterday of how he handled that game. He didn't, like, I watched most of that game. He didn't make too many mistakes, even in throwing. I mean, you didn't see him throwing into triple coverage or double coverage. I mean, he played really well that game. So I think that's a big thing, is having him. I mean, he's a 3-year starter at this point. I think that's going to be big. They only ran for 118 yards. And, I mean, Iowa State ain't Alabama when it comes to a run defense. So that – I mean, I know that's big. I mean, they're a Big 12 team, but 118 yards for a rushing attack like what they're supposed to have this year, little something to kind of look at. I mean, it's week 1. I don't want to make too many predictions. But
well, the thing that stood out to me last year was that we knew Levi Lewis was who he was. He had the same talent last year.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't have the experience. And I fully expected a 2-front Louisiana offense last year with the throwing arm and the stable of backs that they had. But the stable of backs and the offensive line they had last year just absolutely exploded. And so they didn't need Levi Lewis to throw it at all. But now you've got this next year where teams are expecting this 3-headed monster, which they still have in the run game. They fully expect Louisiana to come out, pound them, and run it every sort of way. But now they're having to lean a little bit more on that Levi Lewis's arm. Yeah. And as you can see, it made the difference against a ranked team.
Did they have 2 draft picks? Was Robert Hunt?
At least 2, yes.
Yeah.
And then
3 draft picks, right? Yeah. Okay. So, and I mean, they had 2. They had an O-line. I mean, Robert Hunt. That's a big part of their O-line too that isn't back this season. So, we'll see how they fill that. The Arkansas State game, I thought, was the most exciting game of the entire day. I mean, that game. K-State jumped out that 21-7 lead, and you're like, oh man, like just because of how Arkansas State played last week against Memphis. You just kind of thought, okay, this is how this game is going to go. And then, I mean, I love the Blake Anderson call, the double pass. That kind of sparked the game there. And then Jay Adams was already doing his thing before that. What I really liked on the ending of that game was they didn't go to Adams at all on that last drive until the red zone. They ran the ball like 3 times on that last drive. And that's like, I mean, I know that they probably threw K-State off with that, I really think, because a lot of people probably would have up in that booth probably thought, okay, they're going to attack this guy. They're going to use Adams and they're going to try to attack the whole field with him. And they stayed away from him until literally the red zone. I thought that was an extremely good play calling. I mean, it worked. Who knows if they would have, if they were able to run the ball. That was the big thing. And then Adams, I mean, that kid probably solidified himself as a draft pick. I think with that game alone, just because it was national TV, and I think he's still going to be good. I mean, he was just sitting behind 2 guys that were really solid wide receivers last year, but I really think he could be a draft pick, and that game alone will probably be his highlight reel. So that I love watching that game. The I don't know if did y'all stay up for the Coastal game? Or
I did. To go real quick, but before we move on, the Arkansas State game. I feel like it was a similar setup where Louisiana had these running backs. Arkansas State had this core of wide receivers last year. They had Omar, Kirk Merritt, Dahu Green they had last year, even though he was injured, and Jay Adams. We knew that these 4 guys were going to be strong guys. But for one reason or another, Omar was the one who stood out. And, I mean, Mayer, if he's the most talented, I can't be the one to decide that. But it was another case of we knew that this was there for those of us who study the Sun Belt. But now that the game has shifted somebody had to step up and fill Omar's shoes. Somebody had to step up and fill Kirk Merritt's shoes. And Dahu was there last year. He is still a talented wide receiver, but Jay Adams stepped up in a bigger way, at least this week, and definitely made up for the losses of Kirk Merritt and Omar Bayless on this Arkansas State team. So they didn't really – in this case, it wasn't that they had to change the way they played themselves, but it was that they needed something to fill that gap, and they needed to adjust because teams knew what they were getting. But it's in this case, it's more the same thing. They've got these deep wide receiving core led by an extremely talented wide receiver. I was listening to Fox Sports as I was driving around yesterday, and they brought up Jay Adams, and they were talking about how unbelievable this kid is and how his draft profile and stock went up. And it really occurred to me, like, where were you last year with Omar?
Yeah.
Like, he was just as good, I think. At the very least, he was just as good as what Jay's performance was, and Omar went undrafted.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say which player is better, but exactly, it's that exposure that makes a difference.
Yeah, I think yesterday it was huge. Me and Scott were talking. I think it was the biggest day in the Sun Belt Conference history. If not the best day, because you had national television. You had all 8 of your games on national television, and you went out and you beat 3 Big 12 teams. All on the road, mind you. So all their fans were watching that game. I mean, I'm really interested to see the ratings of those games, just because they're going to be up. I guarantee you, because I think Coastal didn't have fans, or excuse me, Kansas didn't have fans. Kansas State had fans in there, but then Iowa State didn't have fans, and there ain't nothing much. There's not a whole lot going on in Iowa right now. So then
Kansas. For the Kansas Coastal Carolina game, there wasn't going to be a lot. There may not be very many ratings either, because it ended up going till about 1 o'clock Central. Yeah. It was crazy, and I did stay up for that game. I watched the last half of it because I got home from the South game just in time to catch like the last 10 minutes. But by that point, Coastal had already had won the game. It was like the end of the Arkansas State Kansas State game, the Louisiana Iowa State game. Iowa State just kind of laid down. Kansas didn't necessarily lay down, but you knew it was the end. That was it. There wasn't going to be the magical comeback that a lot of Power 5 teams have to pull off against the Sun Belt in these games. But for Coastal, I think the good note was they did it last year, and so there was a knowledge that they could do it again, just because Coastal got better and Kansas is still Kansas. There's an understanding of where Kansas falls in the Power 5 world, and they're not great. They're not a good team at all, but Coastal has gradually gotten better, and CJ Marable has just only gotten better with experience. Something that we touched on in the pages, but Coastal comes into this game, and it was there. This wasn't the lucky game, so to speak. Last year, it didn't necessarily feel like a lucky game, but we didn't expect it. But in this game, Coastal just dragged Kansas on the line of scrimmage. They won how you're supposed to win. We talked on this show about how to pull off the upset, what you got to do. And Coastal did every single thing right. Last year, it was more of Coastal finding things that went their way. In this case, it was Coastal just being a better team.
I mean, Scott, didn't you have their D line as number one?
Their front seven altogether is the best in the Sun Belt, in my opinion. I mean, it's just gross. Every position's got somebody that's just a star. You got C.J. Brewer in the middle, and Jeffrey Gunter, and Teron Jackson's an NFL guy on the outside. There's Silas Kelly and Teddy Gallagher at inside linebacker. This group is disgusting. They had 11 tackles for loss against Kansas. That's crazy. I mean, you stretch that out over the course of the whole season, you're well over 100 tackles for loss. It's just wild what this team can do. I thought in the second half, Kansas kind of they adjusted a little bit. They were able to stretch the field and get some more one-on-one matchups on the outside, which is where Coastal defense is. But credit Coastal, they adjusted right back. That was the difference between the Coastal game and the South Alabama game, that Coastal responded to Kansas's punch back. in the fourth quarter. Slow drive down the field. They turn to Isaiah Likely, who is one of our top tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
And they only used him, I think, once in the first half, and they turned to him a little bit in the fourth quarter, and it resulted in a big drive, a big touchdown drive that really punched Kansas right back.
Yeah, on my notes, I've got Clark, Gallagher, and Jackson as three guys that are. Clark's a big boy he's number 15, and they were talking about him all night long. That he was a tight end that converted into a D lineman, and he's weighing like 330. That guy, he took the middle away a lot that entire game. And then Gallagher, they didn't have anybody on their team that could block Gallagher the entire night. Whenever he was sent in on a blitz or anything like that, none of their O linemen could keep up with him because he was so fast to get around him. So I was very shocked at how well. I mean, I hadn't done as much research on Coastal as you guys have. I remember Teron Jackson from 2 years ago because he left and came back or something like that.
Jeffrey Gunter left and came back.
Yeah, Gunter. Okay, so but they look like a really, really good team. Just the look, like if you put them up on a sideline and you say this is our D line, and you say, holy shit. like that's what I would say if that D-line was coming into my voice, because I'm like, oh, they've got size, they got speed, they look really solid. Their secondary did get gashed late in that game, I will say that. They brought in that backup quarterback, and he made some good throws, but they were still getting gashed on a couple plays. I think Jamie Chadwell did an extraordinary job last night of how he handled. They jumped out to a 28-0 lead, and they get the late field goal. And then what Kansas did when they first came back in, just like I was saying, they threw that first big punch. They threw two big punches before Coastal, responded, and Chadwell kept him. I mean, that freshman quarterback McCall. I mean, you got a redshirt freshman there. You don't he didn't have two good drives. He had two mediocre drives to start the half, but you stuck with him. Like, I thought he did a really good job last night of just kind of keeping everybody calm down. Like we're up 28-0 here, but this is not an over game. So, Thomas, did you got anything else you wanted to add to that game?
No, but I get the feeling that this year's Coastal Carolina squad it's reminding me a lot, at least like where the strengths are. It's reminding me a lot of last year's Georgia State team. Georgia State went in and they beat Tennessee. That was a closer game because it really was a struggle between two decently matched teams. But this year it feels like their Coastal's defense stepped up and the offense has stepped up. They just gained experience, kind of like in Louisiana. They lost some pieces, but they gained experience with the pieces that they kept. And that's the same way with Coastal, except there's less to lose. So I get this feeling that Georgia State last year, they did really well, got to a bowl game, and were legitimately a dark horse for the conference. This year, Coastal, don't know if they're a dark horse yet because we haven't seen how everybody's played, but they're already showing that they could be a bowl game team come December. That's just the level of play that defense has reached, and that's the missing piece. That's the missing piece that they had, and that was the missing piece for Georgia State last year that they picked up.
Scott, you got anything? Scott, you got anything you want to add?
You blinked out for a second. Yeah, the only thing I was going to add was you touched on Grayson McCall. He came into the week as a third-string quarterback. I mean, he was a surprise starter on Saturday. He still did incredibly well. I mean, he came out and managed the offense beautifully. And I think that's something that's kind of held back some teams in the past in the Sun Belt is young quarterbacks coming in and not grasping a kind of the playbook, really just not grasping the playbook. You saw it at South Alabama, really held them back in the past. Texas State as well. But with Coastal Carolina, Grayson McCall came in and ran that pistol option to perfection with CJ and the fullback. And so that was really impressive. And as a fan messaged me on Twitter, I was asking because I had missed the first 10 minutes or so of the game. I said, did he start? He was like, yeah. And I was like, he's third on the depth chart. And he said, well, as a fan, I much rather like it this way. And so I think Grayson McCall it's early, but this could signal the end of that quarterback carousel that has doomed Coastal Carolina over the last few years.
Yeah, no, I mean he didn't show anything last night. I mean, he had one kind of weird play where he tried to pitch it, and they kind of highlighted that. That was the only time where I saw him try to push an envelope that wasn't there. Like that was the only time the entire game. And for a redshirt freshman to stay in the game, to stay in the playbook, and don't try to do too much like that, I thought that was very, very impressive as a redshirt freshman. To be able to do that and kind of keep your head, even because there's a lot of guys when you see a team go back-to-back score, cut your lead in half, there's a lot of guys that say, okay, we got to make something happen here. And he, other than that one play, he really didn't do that. He stayed in his zone. So I thought that was really good. So the only other game that I wanted to get your mention of, just because it was a crazy game, is the Texas State game. The biggest thing that I noticed out of that game was that is a completely different team when Brady McBride is not on the field. I mean, Tyler Vitt is a good quarterback. Tyler Vitt did everything he possibly could in order to help win that game. But the difference that I see of McBride might not have the biggest arm in the world, but the guy just extends a lot of plays that Tyler Vitt just didn't at all, in my opinion, last night. But I just wanted to get what you kind of – I didn't watch the final ending of it. I was kind of flipping around, and then we went to dinner. But what did you kind of get out of that crazy game?
It's a good thing you didn't see the ending. It was very painful. But Tyler Vitt, I got to give props to him. He may not be the most accurate quarterback in the world. He may not be able to chunk it 7 yards down the field. But he put everything he had on the line during this game. I mean, put his body just out there. Did everything he could to win. But really, for Texas State, it was the beginning and the end. There's two things that you have to win in a football game, and you can't get smoked in the first quarter like they did against UTSA, and you can't make the Alabama kicking mistakes that they did at the very end to lose the game. I mean, it feels bad. I feel bad for Texas State, honestly, and those Texas State fans, because they've been through it for years. And they finally have a team that is genuinely exciting to watch. And this happens at the end of the game where they miss an extra point and then miss a chip shot field goal to extend it. It's rough, but overall, I think that Spavital is showing. I think what I was looking for out of Texas State is Spavital going to show. Are we going to see what the new Texas State is all about this year? Last year, I don't think that's possible. Didn't think that was possible. I've always been on the bus where you can't really blame a first-year head coach for anything, regardless of record. He's not playing with his team. He's using his own system with somebody else's players. And so you kind of brush last year off, and you look at this year and you go, okay, Brady McBride, a whole bunch of Band-Aids on offense and defense with grad transfers and JUCO guys, and this is what it is. And it's exciting. It's a lot of yards. It's a lot of scoring. It is something Texas State hasn't seen in years. And it's going to change things. And they have to get over that last hump, though. They still have to get over the hump. I think Spavital said it at the end of the game. When are we going to change the narrative of this university? And I think that is going to resonate with Texas State players going forward.
I think he's doing a hell of a job considering this entire he's a year in, this is year 2, but he lost an entire spring. I mean, everybody did. And he was able to make these type of strides where they actually I know we're in week 2 here, but they competed with SMU, and their offense did not look like just not there. And for him to be able to make strides like this, doing it probably through Zoom calls most of the time and getting kids to understand, I think it's a great coaching job that he's done. I mean, they could be, and that's the other thing, like you were talking about that first year. Even if this year they struggle, I'm not taking anything away from Spavital just because of what he's had to do and how he's had to implement a playbook basically for a second year through Zoom meetings and not being able to do – I don't think they had spring practice. No, I think they might have had a couple of spring practices. But just what's been going on against him, I think he's doing a great job. What about you, Tom?
Oh, he zoomed out like at the last second there.
Sorry.
No, I agree. I think you're right about Brady McBride because he has been just – he is on my list right now of players that have just popped up out of nowhere. And, I mean, yes, the bar was low at Texas State, but right now that offense is shattering the bar. And I think the expectations are going to be pretty high once they get deeper into conference play. You're right. You can't – if you got a 20-yard field goal, you got to make it. But that being that close to winning is a far cry from where they were the last 2-3 years. It kind of reminds me of the first 2 years of Steve Campbell at South. You got your first year where everything's growing pains and it's just terrible. And then the next year, everything's a little bit closer now. You're getting better on offense and defense. You're starting to develop, and you're seeing that development, but it's not resulting in wins and losses. It's not hitting that column yet, but give it time. It'll get there. And you see that happening at South. Now they're in year 3. We'll talk about that in a minute for sure. But like at Texas State, you're absolutely right. These growing pains are still going to happen, but there is a lot of progress, and Brady McBride seems to be their quarterback of the future. I'm not going to do that anymore after Cephas. I'm not going to try to pull that play anymore because, I was a big Cephas Johnson fan, but Brady McBride looks for real.
Yeah, he does. Well, I think that's going to do it with Scott. Scott, you seem to have some friends with you now. And me and Thomas are going to stick around for a little bit and cover up some other games that went on yesterday. Exciting day for the conference here. And Scott, thank you for coming on. We hope the pages get going. We get some more pages. I know a lot of people liked it. What a great way. So again, Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's always a blast.
Quick hitters.
Thanks again to Scott for coming on for us today. He also did the Sunbelt Pages has its own podcast now too. You can go check that out. You can go follow the Sunbelt Pages at SB Pages on Twitter. Great content. Or like I said, I haven't really been as involved in social media, but our team is fantastic. They're doing great stuff over there. So go follow that. Back to the games though. 3 wins over 3 Power 5 teams in one day. I gotta say, I knew each individual one was possible. I didn't think that all 3 were going to happen on the same day. That is the bar. That is the breakthrough that happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw something that if you would have put $100 down in a parlay to have all 3 Sunbelt teams hit, which would be win the game, you would have made $9,600 today. You would have woken up with $9,600 more dollars. So yeah, no, I don't think Vegas didn't predict it. But here's what this is what I want, and I haven't made any yet and I don't want to at all for these first couple of weeks. I'm not making any season predictions. I'm not I can't do that because literally we don't know what a team's going to look like at all coming into a new week.
I got to stop you real quick. We literally have breaking news as we're recording right now. The latest AP poll is out right now. Louisiana is ranked 19th. App State is ranked 24th. The Sun Belt has 2 ranked teams for the first time ever. And Louisiana is now the highest ranked Sun Belt team of all time.
2020, baby. The year of the Fun Belt. That's what we're calling it. 2 ranked teams. What an incredible – I mean, that's what happens when you go on the road and you beat a couple of Big 12 teams. See, I love preseason ranking. Actually, no. I've always hated preseason rankings. Never liked them, especially now. I mean, it's 2020. You can't predict any team here because what I was trying to get to was every week that team's going to look different because you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit, but you could have a team. Tell you what, let's just jump right into it. I know we're going to talk about South here in a little bit. Let's go to Georgia Southern first and how we did that. We talked about Arkansas State. Arkansas State was missing 13 players going into that game yesterday. Still came out with a win. They were missing Dahu Green. Dahu Green didn't go to that game. You had Georgia Southern who had 33 players that missed that game. Not 33, ladies and gentlemen. they only carry 85 scholarship players. That's more than a third of that team.
It's almost half.
That's almost half of that team, and it was reflective on the field. I mean, you have no idea what these teams are going to look like week in and week out. So I'm going to try my damnedest to not make any sort of full season predictions because you just don't know. It's going to be one of the craziest years of college football that anyone has ever covered. I don't care if you're a 65-year-old guy who's seen college football, who's lived through it all. There will be no season like 2020. It will not be none.
A lot of people still remember 2007. A lot of people were obviously alive then at that point and remember that crazy season. You had a bunch of Power 5 teams taking down other Power 5 teams, sniping the number 2. The number 2 was cursed that year, the number 2 team. But this year is a completely different animal. And I think that with the lack of Power 5 teams, the lack of other group of 5 teams, there is a power vacuum I have to say that phrase. Instead of it is a Power 5 power vacuum. All these teams and conferences are starting to fill the gap now. And we're starting to see all these teams that still took place, still practiced and are holding games are benefiting from the loss of these other teams and conferences just not being there. And that is what's unprecedented about this. We're seeing 2007 on a much crazier scale.
It's going to be – it already is wild. It's not going to be. It is wild. I mean, this is – what happened yesterday I think was reflective of where the Sun Belt is and what their teams are. I mean, I saw a lot of people were like, oh, well, it's COVID. They haven't practiced. They're, the resources down. I was like, well, welcome to the group of 5 where we don't have those same resources. We don't have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 guys where we can depend on a third stringer to come in and be just as good as the first stringer. Welcome to G5 because it's not like that here. And so that's why I think it's going to be just wild. You could have a team. Alabama could go into a game and be missing 10 of their starters. I mean, you just don't know. So every week is going to be different. Every week is going to be wild. I think this is just the beginning. You saw, not that I think it played a big factor, but you saw what it's like for teams to come into an opposing team's place that wasn't jam-packed, that didn't have fans in it, and it's a totally new ball game. I mean, that I won't say that's the biggest factor, but that played a part in games. I still think the talent on the field, whoever's on that field making tackles, making plays, that's what decides that ball game. But there is a tiny factor of these big stadiums. These boys don't get these kids that come from small schools. There's no intimidation factor when they come into these stadiums because most.
Well, let's go ahead and get into it because there's a transition there that's easy for me to make.
Go for it.
And the weird, I gotta say, the weirdest thing to me was I went to Hancock Whitney Stadium last night or Saturday night, and one of the weirdest things to me was how quiet it felt. And it's not because it was because there weren't a lot of people, but it was because there were so few people separated. Like even at games at Troy when the team was bad, you still had students that were there cheering and going, and there was there at South as well. But it just, the way that acoustics and science work, that sound is not bashing the field like it would in a jam-packed stadium. And the people, when there are fewer of them and they're more quiet, the quietness is louder, so to speak. Like it's just it was weird to me to sit there and watch a snap and hear players on the field taking the snap and saying things. And so I know that compared to having even the same amount of people in the stands cheering at Ladd has got to be crazy and weird to think about, just because of the way that things had to happen in order for us to get to this point have changed things in ways that we don't even think about. Oh. I gotta say that the stadium is gorgeous. That's the first thing I got to say about the new stadium for South. It reminds me – I get a little bit of vibes of the Vet. I get a little bit of vibes of Pensacola's Wahoo Stadium. I get a little vibes of little bits and pieces where I know that they went to other stadiums and looked at and said, we like this, let's do this, let's do this. The stadium looks fantastic. Nick with Forgotten Five said it's basically what Ladd would be if Ladd was built today. I think that's right. It feels timeless. It feels the way it's built and the way that it looks. They can add on and change things and do things in the future. But as it stands right now, if this was the same stadium that they'd play in 20, 25 years from now, it would look the same and feel the same way. It would still look fresh and new as it does right now. It's just – it was well designed, and I got to hand it to them. It's a pretty solid stadium.
It
The
looks
experience
really
at
good
the
on
end.
TV. I can tell you that. It
Oh, I
looked,
bet.
it looked really good on TV. Let's get into the game. I mean, what we saw on the field here. First half, complete polar opposite halves for each team. South Alabama looked like the team that we saw in week 1. They looked good.
Yeah.
They were on tempo. I mean, even though they had Lovertich in there instead of Trotter, because Trotter didn't come out on fire like he did week 1. They didn't look like they were missing a step between week 1 and week 2.
You're right, and I think it's worth bringing up the comparison of Coastal Carolina's quarterback was McCall. That's his last name.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a 2 quarterback system going last year, and they brought in McCall Saturday night for the game against Kansas, and he went off. Yeah. Brady McBride, a new quarterback for Texas State, he went off. Chance Lovertich stepped into the game. Desmond Trotter hurt his shoulder against Southern Miss, and so he went in for a few drives against Tulane, but he came off the field after getting hit. He was nursing that shoulder. And then Chance Lovertich hopped in and took over and just completely dominated. He stepped up and filled that gap. And I honestly made me wonder, why either of these guys, why there was a quarterback battle. Lovertich made fewer mistakes than Trotter did. Trotter, I feel, is maybe a little bit more athletic, but Lovertich feels like a better quarterback for Kenny Edenfield's system. And Kenny Edenfield definitely has a system. Nick was making fun of me last night because I saw all the hallmarks of that Kenny Edenfield offense, that spread offense, that quick-paced offense. There was literally a moment where I called the exact play for South. It was 3rd and long, and they called a timeout, and they rallied together, and it looked exactly like Edenfield's offense against Troy. They got the first down, and then they kept grinding and grinding. But at that point in the game, it was late in the game. It was the 3rd quarter or 4th quarter. At that point in the game, they looked like they had no momentum whatsoever. And they had all the momentum in the first half. South was just clicking with Lovertich in at quarterback, handing the ball off to Carlos Davis. He was picking up runs. Colin Lacey, the Faith Academy at Mobile guy, was doing the swing back sweep duties. He was a speedy guy. And then Tolbert showed up. Jalen Tolbert showed up. He's that 1-2 punch that they have. Quan Baker was basically not used as much as he was against Southern Miss. But Jalen Tolbert stepped up, and in that first half, he had a fantastic first half, picking up just little dink and dunk first downs for 12, 15 yards. And that's how they were grinding. That's how they were getting stuff done. But at some point, they stopped making those plays. They stopped giving it to Carlos Davis. They stopped giving it to Colin Lacey. They tried to do the passing game 100%, and they just lost the steam that they had in the first half.
Yeah, they hold on a second here. Yeah, I think it boils down to adjustments. Halftime adjustments. You saw a coaching staff that made adjustments, and that was Tulane's coaching staff. I mean, Willie Fritz, he figured it out. I mean, Willie Fritz has played. He knows Kenny Edenfield. I mean, he knows Kenny Edenfield from when he was at Georgia Southern. He knows how to stop that. And you want to know what? Create pressure. And as soon as they started getting in that backfield, that game was over because as I watched both of those quarterbacks, none of them felt comfortable in the pocket. None of them stepped up. You go back, you watch that game. Chance Lovertich, here's his big problem that I recognized last time. He doesn't step up in a pocket. When he gets flustered, he goes backwards. He will not step up into the pocket. And as a quarterback, you have got to do that. I mean, you got to if you've got guys who are teeing off on you, take them out deep where they rush deep and go up the field. That's what you have to do as a quarterback. Get up in the pocket. And because they're clearly their DNs, the South's left and right tackles could not handle them. And then they went into stunts, and then it was completely over when they started stunting on this O-line. And so that's what I saw in the second half. Their D-line completely took over that game. South moved away from running the ball, and they forced two quarterbacks that are average, maybe a little bit above average quarterbacks to put the entire game on their shoulders. And when you've got D-line that knows they aren't going to try to run on us right now, they're going to try to pass the ball, they just teed off on them. And they never looked comfortable in the second half, and it was a completely different team. And that's the things that we've seen really good glimpses of South Alabama so far in the first 2 weeks. But this was a game that you wanted to see, okay, they adjusted, what are you going to do? And it just didn't happen. And hopefully, and again, I know it's 2020, the practices, all of them getting ready. That's a sign of that right there, because you could only coach so much. You only had so much of your game plan because of how much time you had to prepare. And so that's going to be a problem, is who's going to be the better people at making adjustments at halftime in games just like these. And we saw that in a couple of different games this weekend. So I still like what South looks like so far in the first 2 weeks. They look so much better on offense.
And that was the thing.
You go ahead.
Okay, so you froze up. I'm sorry. You're right. They look so much better on both sides of the ball. They're looking a lot better than they were even in Joey Jones's last year, honestly. Who was there? Alyssa caught a picture of him. It was great. Mm-hmm. South Alabama, we've said every single year under Steve Campbell, we said, the first year it was ground zero. Like Scott said earlier in the show, your first year head coach, you're doing your own system with somebody else's players, and it didn't really get anywhere. Year two comes along, and you still got a brutal schedule, but it was clear in 2019 compared to 2018, the strides that had been made in developing players and getting them used to the system and changing things up and recruiting, which is a great thing that Steve Campbell is good at doing. This team had grown, and now you're seeing the next step of South Alabama. I was saying that they reminded me a lot of South Alabama in 2016. They remind me a lot of Troy in 2016. Not at that necessarily the win-loss column will reflect that, but the way that they play, the way that they do things, and the way that this team is just methodical, I think South could be a bowl game team too. They look so much better than they did the last 2 years. And I think this is the first year that that's really going to impact the win-loss column. Not that it would completely be, 3-9 to 9-3.
Yeah. Steve Campbell has literally won everywhere he's been. Everywhere he's gone, he's won. And so people need to understand that I have a lot of respect for Joey Jones. He's a great guy. But Steve can't it's going to be so much different. I mean, it already is. The level of athlete that is there now. Look at what their team looks like now compared to what the guys looked like when Joey Jones was in there. I mean, Jeremy Reeves is a great player, but physically wise, Jeremy Reeves is 5'10". He's not a dude. I mean, he's in shape. Don't get me wrong. He's an NFL. He's having an incredible career. But you go and you start looking at what their dudes look like on their D line, what their dudes look like on the O line. Like they look like just a team now. And so South's going to get there. I don't want to make any predictions of bowls because you just don't know. I'm going to try to stay away from that as much as I can this year. especially early on, just because we just won't know. But I do love what I see out of them. There are glimpses, and this is what I kind of want to get into. The thing I noticed yesterday is that for the first time since I've been really following the Sun Belt, every team that I watched, from Texas State to App State to Louisiana to South, every single team that I watched was really good at one phase of the game. They all did one phase of the game really, really well. And South showed that for the first half, that their defense, they were hitting guys. They were getting guys behind the line of scrimmage. They did that part of the game so well. And I just saw that with everybody this weekend. And that's the scary thing about the Sun Belt this year, is that you didn't have teams that did something really, really well. App State always has run the ball really, really well. What they do yesterday, 272. Their defense, it was spotty. Louisiana, they didn't run the ball very well, but you want to know what they did really well? Special teams. Their special teams looked great, yes. And that might have been because Iowa State wasn't ready, or their special teams looked bad, but their special teams looked really good. Coastal Carolina, we talked about that earlier. Their defense looks great. I mean, they could ride that defense all year long. If it continues to play, if they have all those players on the field, that is a really, really good defense. And Arkansas State, I mean, it's their bread and butter. They're going to have a wide receiver that's just going to be better than most of the DBs, if not all of them, on the field. They did that really, really well, and that's what I took away from all of the games yesterday. Now, Georgia Southern, we're going to get into here. Georgia Southern was missing 33 guys. Georgia Southern, they won the game. That is literally all you could have asked for out of Georgia Southern. I don't care how you win it. If it's ugly, it's a win. And guess what?
And that is as ugly as you're going to get.
It was ugly, but they won. And so Georgia Southern, I don't even want to delve too far into that game, because they were literally missing half their team.
Well, the other thing was that Shai Wertz was out of the game. Nick was telling. I didn't
even know he went out of the game. I watched the first half.
Exactly. I didn't know that either. Nick told me Shai Wertz was out of the game. And then on top of that, their backup, I think his name is Franklin or whatever, he didn't suit up. So they were on a third-string quarterback. So you got Georgia Southern, who's down Wesley Kennedy and 33 other guys. Yeah, they lose their first and second-string quarterback, and they still managed to pull off the win, a very ugly win, but a win nonetheless against Campbell after taking as many blows as you can to your roster.
I mean, I'm looking at just a box score here of the Georgia Southern Campbell game. Campbell had 380 yards. They had 17 first downs. They had no turnovers, but Campbell had 138 yards of penalties. That's how much they had. And Georgia Southern, only 5 penalties for 27 yards. You're missing 33 guys, and you were able to keep your penalties underneath 40 yards total for a game, and you're missing all of those starters. So you're missing guys who aren't on the same rhythm, haven't practiced. I mean, yeah, they're doing reps, but they aren't pulling reps with each other every single time like what they've been doing in practice. And so for them to do what they did, they got the job done, and that's all that needs to be talked about Georgia Southern, because they just got the job done. I mean, and credit Chad Lunsford for just getting out of there with a win. I mean, it was really incredible. Yes, they're playing Campbell. I understand that it's an FCS school, but you take 33 guys away, and not just like bottom feeder guys, sprinkling starters all over the place, and just take them out, and you go try to win a ball game with your college and see how confident you are.
Is that you not only Shai Wertz is out, not one of the 33, but he's out, and Wesley Kennedy, your number one running back, is out. Yeah. Those your two big guys. You're an option team, and your number one and number two runners, people who rush the ball, are out. The fact that you're right, I like the discipline thing that you brought up. That was pretty solid. That shows just how well that team is coached.
Yeah.
And if you're going to say that team does something right, it's discipline. Georgia Southern did something right, and that's
27 yards of penalties. That's discipline for missing so many guys that are used to being out on the field and guys that aren't used to being out on the field when it comes game time. Let's go into the App State Charlotte game. We'll kind of keep this one quick too. App State ended up winning by 15. The game stayed a lot closer for a lot longer than this game should have been close. App State.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. It did not look good at the beginning there. Well, wait, what am I talking about? App State was up 14-0 at one point.
They were, but the App State had a lot of missed opportunities early in that game. They fumbled on the 2-yard line. That they should have put the game away early. The biggest thing, like what I was alluding to, they ran for 300 yards on 50 carries and averaged 6 yards a game. That's App State. Like that's just what they do. Yes, Scott did hit on it. Zach Thomas didn't play as well, but you got to remember this is coach number 3 in 3 years. He's like, yes, he's gonna stick. Obviously, he's gonna stick to their MO, but he's gonna have wrinkles. I mean, he's got his own wrinkles that he probably put in the system, and it's you're still gonna see stuff like that. So I don't think Zach Thomas necessarily had a bad day. He had 1 interception, still threw for over 200 yards. They had 29 first downs. They're still moving the ball. And that's what App State does. So a 2-score win at home. It was raining, I think, up there too. It wasn't pretty. I think App State. There's no panic button at all.
This is App State's first game, right? This is their first game of the year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got Coach 3 in 3 years. You've got your first game of the year. It was at home, so I mean that's a point against them, but there's a reason that I did not pick them as my bet as the top dog in my opinion, based in the Sun Belt pages this year. Something's got to give. At some point, you can't have that much turnover. We saw it at Arkansas State, even though they now have Blake Anderson, and Blake Anderson's been solid this whole time. But at some point, something's got to give. And you're right, it's not a panic button yet, but I don't think this is the same App State team from the past 2 years. They're as talented, but I think they're going to be missing something along the way. I think that this might be the year that a team takes over the East away from App State outright.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see. I think their defense, if any part of that team is down, it's probably going to be on the defensive side of the ball just because of who they lost off of that defense last year. So we're definitely going to see here. The only team this entire week that just kind of was flat is UL Monroe. And there's a lot of stuff going on over there. Their offensive coordinator, I want to say, just stepped down. They were the only team, and to give them credit, Army's not a bad team. Army is a good team.
No.
You
saw what Army did to Middle Tennessee last week. ULM was also the team.
You go ahead.
No, you're right. They just completely crushed Middle Tennessee. So honestly, the worst that could happen is losing 52 to get to nothing again. But after losing one of your coaches, after basically having half your season put on hold, after having that first game that you expected to have pushed to the end of the year because of COVID issues and because your team was hit by those COVID issues and dealing with them mentally as well, honestly, ULM, for doing exactly what we expected them to do, that's a victory. I mean, I think we fully expected ULM to go in there and get sort of tossed around by Army, but I didn't. I expected something to be weird about it, but I really don't think it was. There was nothing weird about it. They played exactly what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
They still have some of the solid, like they have a bunch of players that are really good, but by losing a coach, you're going to be losing some of that mesh that holds everything together. So we talked about Texas State and South Alabama getting better, so I feel like ULM is starting to fall to the bottom of the Sun Belt.
That's literally what I was going to get to. I think ULM. I mean, just looking at their stats right here, only 9 first downs. They were 4 of 12 on third down. They only had 200 total yards the entire game. Now, granted, I'm looking at time of possession. They still had 23 minutes of time of possession. It wasn't like Army held onto the ball for 43 minutes of the game and they only had it for 15. Like there wasn't a whole on offensive wise. There just wasn't a whole lot of positives to take out for ULM. And unfortunately, I think like you said, I think ULM, depending on just what happens, it's going to be a crazy year. Don't get me wrong, but just the way that they played, they didn't look. And I watched a little bit of the game. They're going to play a lot more talented teams this year, a lot more talented teams, and they're gonna struggle if they continue playing like this. But unfortunately, the expectations I feel like are pretty low right now for ULM. So that was the most of our games, if not all of them, from this weekend. An amazing weekend. I said it earlier in the show. I think this was the best ever day in the history of the Sun Belt Conference, because you had 3-0 national television. Everyone's watching. It's the first full slate weekend of college football, and you had everyone watching. And just the way that they started out of saying, how even the in-game guys were talking about team to team, to the wrap-ups of Sunbelt had a day. I mean, that is what you want to have. And next week we get one more week of it before we get, the SEC playing. I know the ACC's playing. They had their kind of opening week this week as well. You go and you look at what Conference USA did this week. 1-5. 1-5. And their games were Miami, UAB, Texas, UTEP, App and Charlotte, UTSA, Texas State, and Louisville and Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky lost by 2 scores to Louisville, and then we split the head-to-head matchups this week between App State and Charlotte. So 1-1 against Conference USA.
And they had to go to overtime to beat Texas State.
Yeah.
One of their teams had to go to overtime to beat one of our teams.
Yeah. So
they barely made it through.
I think and it would have been really nice for South to get a win over the AAC, just because the AAC is the top group of 5 conference right now. They're just depth wise. They've got probably the 5 strongest teams. We're getting close though. I will say that the way that we played, this is a big.
Sorry, stuttering, but there are a lot of good positive things to take away from South and Tulane. There's South manhandled Tulane for the first half. They literally just controlled the game. What changed was, like you said, was that adjustment that Tulane made. But South Alabama showed its own as standing up to an American team. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like they got blown out. They literally were winning until the last 10 minutes of the game. Mm-hmm. So it's not like this team was when Tulane finally took the lead at the end, that was the first time Tulane had ever taken the lead in the game. Yep. So for South Alabama to hold on to the lead for that long, that says something about South Alabama. And if South Alabama is the middle of the pack in the Sun Belt right now, what does that say about the Sun Belt compared to the American?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, next week should be exciting. We get to see Troy play. We get to see Georgia State play. The other 2 teams that did not play this weekend. So we'll definitely, and we've got some more big matchups, I know. And I mean, as of right now, as of this recording, we have big matchups. So we'll see what happens during the week. So
it is what it is.
Yeah. Take us away, dude. What do the people need to do?
Oh, well, you know what they need to do. They need to follow us on Twitter at the OG Bench Boys. I live tweeted the entire game last night from that account, and I posted some pictures that Alyssa put up. We'll be doing some more tweeting from that account. So just follow that for all the updates. Hit that subscribe button while you're listening or watching, whichever one it is. Hit that like button. Just share it to your friends. If you got one person you think that might watch this, send it to them. Just do it. Get it out of the way. God, I'm so excited about how this weekend went, and I'm excited for what the rest of the season will bring.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great weekend. Just looking early schedule, we've already got our first conference game coming up. Louisiana, the 19th ranked Louisiana Raging Cajuns, taking on Georgia State. So they jump right into conference play as a ranked team. So stay tuned for that. We might have another episode this week. Not really sure, just depending on. It's going to be a busy week. We're down here on the Gulf Coast, so we're covering some hurricanes coming through. So with that,
and we're also covering some high school football. So
we are.
I don't know if you saw that, but is basically a Bench Boys special every Friday night on NBC 15. We got
Every
the
single
Blitz.
Friday night on NBC 15. Me and him get to cover some high school football, so it's definitely a fun Friday night. So, all right, well, that'll do it. Thanks again for joining in, and come on back.